You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 29th of June 2026 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up. A survivor is pulled from a collapsed building in Venezuela, but with the all-important deadline of 72 hours now passed after the earthquakes, we'll examine the chaotic rescue and recovery efforts, with 50,000 people still missing. Also ahead, in the next 60 minutes, Serbia's president says he'll stand down. After surviving more than a decade in power and several years of protest, we'll ask, why is he going now? Israel and Lebanon signed a peace agreement last week. Will this lead to the withdrawal of Israeli troops? Plus, we'll find out why the CEO of Rome, Fiumicino, fears that changes to passport controls are going to overwhelm his airport. We'll look at Monday's papers and...
I did take a trip with my kids when they were younger for about 2 weeks. I was happy I did. I wish I could have stayed longer, but Egypt is Egypt, no two ways around it.
The actor and entrepreneur Robert de Niro tells us why his luxury hotel chain Nobu is opening up in Egypt. That's all coming up on The Globalist, live from London. First, a look at what else is happening in today's news. The US and Iran have agreed to stop a series of clashes around the Strait of Hormuz. Australia and Vanuatu have signed a wide-ranging economic and security deal. And the world's most powerful particle accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider, shuts down today for 4 years for an upgrade. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio for more on these stories, but first, Venezuela faces the harrowing prospect of finding the 50,000 people who went missing after last week's earthquakes. With the all-important 72 hours now passed, that's a window when there is a greatest chance of pulling people out alive. The focus now turns to recovery. Amid the grief at the confirmed loss of 1,450 people, there is also anger at the slowness of response and the overall handling of the disaster. Well, I'm joined now by Christopher Sabatini, who's a senior fellow for Latin America at Chatham House. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Could you bring us the latest to this one? The worst hit is the area along the Caribbean coast, isn't it?
Yeah, La Guaira is the worst area. It was also the worst hit area in 1999 when there were massive floods that caused mudslides, which at the time were really one of the worst natural disasters, and now they get struck again. A lot of the buildings we're seeing affected actually were built after those mudslides. So we're going to start looking at, or people are already looking at, the codes that those were built to and the materials that were used and the standards, because there's some suspicion that basically the government cut a lot of corners. And even in other buildings, there are 125 total buildings that have been flattened in Caracas and La Guaira. It's 125. And a lot of those were also privately built buildings. But the question is, were codes enforced during this time? And quite likely not.
I mean, it's incredible. I think that the Financial Times was saying that the initial damage caused to homes and assets is $6.7 billion US. I mean, that could floor any country, but Venezuela in a parlous state, in a parlous economic state anyway, is really going to suffer here.
Yeah, I'll give you some numbers. Basically, the Venezuelan economy contracted after 2013 by 75%. 3/4 of the economy just basically was eliminated in a matter of about 10 years. 8 million people almost have left the country because of the economic desperation. It was just revealed last week by a company that was hired to look at the books for Venezuela that it owes now in defaulted debt a total of $240 billion. That's a controversial number because originally it was thought to be about $170 billion. But either way, and we don't know where this firm came up with the extra $70 billion. If it's $240 billion, that's 200 times, or 200% rather, Venezuela's GDP. So that's just one. And fiscally, they're broke. The oil that's exported, that's run through the United States, is actually held in an offshore bank and then managed by the United States. It's been about between $5 to $8 billion worth of oil that's been sold since January 3rd through this mechanism. but only about 3 billion of those profits have gone so far, we think, but we don't know, to the Venezuelan government. So even an attempt to dig themselves out of this fiscal hole, no pun intended, is a very difficult task.
Meanwhile, they have this dreadful job of trying to find 50,000 people who have gone missing. And the constant narrative that is coming out of Venezuela is that there is no help. There is no state help. Yes, we have international teams in the likes of Turkey and Syria, experts in earthquake recovery. But the fact remains is that the woman in charge, Delcy Rodriguez, is Donald Trump's, and he cannot let her fail.
That's exactly right. So, first of all, in the 20 years of government of Delcy Rodriguez's party, the PSUV, they basically gutted infrastructure investment. It's been crumbling. Hospitals, electric grids, but that also includes roads. And so you're seeing the single paths to get to La Guaira are blocked. And even if there are rescue teams ready, and what's curious is in a lot of these rescue videos you do not see the armed forces, which is interesting because they're typically the first responders in this case. But they've been deeply riddled with corruption and mismanagement and politicization. And Delcy Rodriguez even in May, only had about a 25% approval rating. So she, as you say, is up against her own sort of limits in terms of popular legitimacy and the fact that she wasn't elected. She was handpicked by Donald Trump to succeed Nicolas Maduro. So Trump has to make this work. All he's offered so far is a pittance. He offered $150 million for reconstruction and assistance. They say more is on the way, but I'm not sure Donald Trump is going to be willing to invest U.S. taxpayer dollars in rebuilding a country that now his many ways, his political fate is tied to.
Indeed, the US cannot have a Venezuela collapse again, can it?
No, it can't. Again, with 8 million people that had left earlier, now obviously fewer are going to return, if any. And now he has to prevent, because again, this is an America First president. This is a president who campaigned against immigrants. He campaigned in particular against Venezuelan immigrants, saying that they had a gang linked to supposedly the Venezuelan government had taken over a town in Colorado. He has to seal off these borders. And if this collapse, if you will, sort of the natural tragedy built on top of a human tragedy or human-made tragedy, and that's the failure of the government, stretching back 20 years, it is a cocktail for the sort of out-migration that he has denounced for so long and made part of his campaign of stopping.
Christopher Sabatini, Senior Fellow for Latin America at Chatham House, thank you so much for joining us on The Globalist. Now, first, Viktor Orban left power. Now is Alexander Vučić set to follow suit. Serbia's president is a long-time Orban ally, and his detractors have accused him of adopting a similar authoritarian style. But over the weekend, Mr. Vučić told tens of thousands of supporters at a rally in Belgrade that he's going to step down as head of state. He's promised that presidential and parliamentary elections will both follow. So what has happened? Well, Monocle's man in the Balkans is Guy Delorney, and he can tell us more. Good morning, Guy.
Good morning, Emma, and good morning, everyone.
So is Vučić going?
Well, he says he is, but, he's made these sort of comments before, and there's going and going when it comes to Alexander Vučić and Serbia and power. Now, Mr. Vučić has said he'll resign as president within weeks. That gives him considerable leeway for starters, because his term doesn't actually end until May next year. He's also said he'll call parliamentary elections and help his Progressive Party to campaign in those elections for yet another victory. They've been in power since 2012. And I don't think you'll find too many people betting against the possibility that the Progressive Party's candidate for Prime Minister will be a certain A. Vučić.
Because this is not necessarily the position that's important here.
Absolutely not. The important thing here is the man rather than the position he holds. And I've known Alexander Vučić a long time, since he first entered power, in fact, in 2012. The first big interview I did for him was actually for Monocle magazine when he was deputy prime minister. But the reason I was interviewing a deputy prime minister was it was very clear at that point who was actually in charge in Serbia. And he's moved through these roles since prime minister 2014, president since 2017, even though president is supposedly mostly a ceremonial role in Serbia. Mr. Vučić has definitively been running the country from that office. And when we look at Serbia and power, I think there's a pretty good chance that lots of people in Serbia at the moment, Serbian citizens, would struggle to name the prime minister of the country right now because Mr. Vucic dominates everything. He's on the TV all the time. Everything runs through him. Some people call him Superman, and it's not meant as a compliment.
But what we have had in the last couple of years, following the collapse of that railway roof in Novi Sad, are perpetual, constant, present protests.
And we saw more of them yesterday in Kraljevo, which is one of the cities in Serbia. And we had thousands of students there saying, it's the end for you, Vucic. But these protests have been going on constantly, as you mentioned, Emma, for more than 18 months now. And I always refer to them as anti-corruption protests, because that's what they are at their heart. People are saying that canopy roof at Novi Sad railway station collapsed because of corrupt practices, and those corrupt practices go all the way to the top. The buck has to stop with Mr. Vucic. If he says he's in charge of everything, then he must have been in charge of that catastrophe as well. And that was a signature project of Mr. Vucic. It was part of the Belgrade to Budapest high-speed railway line. And the protesters have been saying all along, you've got blood on your hands. You were meant to be making your citizens' lives better. Instead, you've killed them. Now, Mr. Vucic has shown that he can stay in power despite these protests going on. We had one recently in Belgrade where there were almost 200,000 people. That wasn't even the largest protest that we've seen. But he does have a large base of support within Serbia. His party is comfortably the most popular any way you want to look at it. But perhaps now he's making these calculations. He has shown himself over the past 14 years to be a very, very shrewd manipulator and assessor of the situation. And he's looking at the situation now and thinks that this is the time to make the move. And he's deployed parliamentary elections on various occasions over the years at times which suit him. So he's figuring right now this is a good time for him to go for it.
Guy Delorney, Monocle's Balkans correspondent, thank you so much for joining us on The Globalist. It's 9:12 in Beirut, 7:12 here in London. Now, it was a matter of hours after the signing of a peace agreement between Israel and Lebanon that there were reports of exchanges of fire between the Israeli military and Hezbollah. This was followed later by the leader of Hezbollah condemning the deal as humiliating, disgraceful and a surrender of sovereignty. So, in this context, what hope is there for the ultimate withdrawal of Israeli troops from Lebanon and further afield from the likes of Syria and Gaza? Well, David Wood is senior analyst for Lebanon at the International Crisis Group. I'm delighted to say he joins us from Damascus this morning. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So just explain to us a little bit about this issue that we face is that Hezbollah have condemned this deal, but part of the deal involves a withdrawal of Israeli troops at not necessarily at a fast pace, but at a pace nonetheless.
Exactly. So this latest framework agreement between Israel and Lebanon was announced on Friday. And this is the latest of several recent agreements and ceasefire proposals to resolve this long-running conflict between the two countries. But as you point out with your question, the key problem here is that one of the belligerents, being Hezbollah, is not only not a party to the agreement, but explicitly rejects it because it says that it does not provide two key guarantees that Lebanon needs. And they are, first of all, providing for an actual cessation of hostilities and that Israel cannot continue to attack targets in Lebanon. And secondly, a clear timetable for Israel to withdraw from territory that it occupies in the country's south. So in Hezbollah's opinion, this amounts to a capitulation by the Lebanese government, and that it would have been, in Hezbollah's opinion, better for Lebanon to stick with what came before, which was Iran intervening on Lebanon's behalf and holding up ongoing negotiations with the US unless there's an actual ceasefire in Lebanon and clear steps towards Israel withdrawing from the country.
And in the middle of all this is Israel's presence, not just in Lebanon, but, for example, where you are in Damascus, in Syria. The presence of Israel in so many countries is absolutely unprecedented when it comes to issues of borders and nationhood.
Exactly. And I think what we're witnessing now is still Israel's new direction in terms of its security priorities, as it terms it, post the 7th of October attacks. And that is that Israel, more than ever now, insists that its neighbours either enter into peace agreements with it, such as Egypt and Jordan, or that its other neighbours ensure that any enemies of Israel are kept at a large physical distance from the country. So, as you mentioned, in Syria, there is an Israeli occupation in the country's south in a security zone until it can be sure that there will be no attacks originating from Syria. And of course, the same is happening now in Lebanon, where Israel insists that up to the so-called yellow line that it's created in southern Lebanon, that its troops will not be leaving until Hezbollah is disarmed. But the problem, of course, is that the Lebanese government does not actually have the capacity to deliver on that undertaking because it does not have either the military capacity or sufficient political support within Lebanon to force Hezbollah to stand down and disarm, given that this could only lead to disastrous consequences within Lebanon and potentially widespread violence.
So what does this mean for the Lebanese people?
The Lebanese people, it means that this is an incredibly uncertain situation. And while there are some inside Lebanon who welcome this agreement with Israel as a historic step forward in terms of each country recognizing each other's sovereignty, for many others, they fear that because there's no actual political consensus around the key issue here and the fundamental dispute between Israel and Lebanon, which is the issue of Hezbollah, that therefore there's no actual meaningful way forward or way to implement the agreement. But I think when we're thinking about the consequences for the Lebanese, first and foremost in our mind should be the hundreds of thousands of people who Israel has displaced during this conflict. And even though the latest framework agreement provides for a gradual withdrawal of Israel from southern Lebanon, it's very unclear how long that would take and in which circumstances. So until then, these people will continue to live with great uncertainty and in increasing hardship as they struggle to make do outside their home communities with increasingly scarce resources.
The wider question as well is let's look at where you are in Syria. The fact remains is Syria on the road to recovery, one would hope. But when you have the presence like the Israeli military, but then you also have the influence of the United States as well, that is that creates a very uncertain situation, doesn't it?
Absolutely, because on the one hand, while countries like Lebanon and Syria, which have undergone cycles of warfare, undergone extreme economic hardship, and are looking to turn a page, of course it can be useful and in some cases essential to have support from the international community, and the United States is a key member of that. But on the other, it's clear that not just the United States, but even countries like Iran, for example, in both Syria and Lebanon, while they may have their supporters inside the country, can also contribute by intervening in domestic affairs to enlivening domestic tensions. So on the one hand, while it's a positive for Syria that the United States and the Trump administration wants to see Syria turn a page and move on, the question in Syria will always be, but okay, what kinds of conditions is the US going to set for that? Does it, for example, want the Sharia administration to become closer to Israel? These are exactly the same concerns that are being faced in Lebanon, where on the one hand, it's understandable that Lebanon's political leadership wants to negotiate on Lebanon's behalf and not rely on a country like Iran to intervene constantly to give Lebanon a seat at the table. But on the other hand, Lebanon's political leadership is now facing widespread criticism, including on the basis that it has effectively capitulated to Israel and is collaborating with an Israeli-US project towards Lebanon, which does not actually have the country's best interests at heart.
David Wood, Senior Analyst for Lebanon at the International Crisis Group. Thank you for joining us on the line from Damascus in Syria. Still to come on today's Globalist.
It isn't essential to go to Hollywood, but once you hit it big, you're definitely going to want to go there because it is the Mecca, if I may call it that.
All this week, we'll be asking what makes America such a superpower. Today, Karen Krzanovich will talk to us about Hollywood. Stay tuned.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, an obsessive attention to detail. With UBS's Chief Investment Office House View, we're focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals, so you get the big picture broken down into thought-provoking insights. Delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Let's continue with today's newspapers. Joining me, Yossi Mackelberg, Senior Consultant Fellow at the Middle East North Africa Programme at Chatham House and a regular voice around the microphone. You were here for Monocle on Sunday yesterday, Yossi.
Yeah, I have a sense of déjà vu.
Welcome back.
Good morning. Great to be.
You've changed your clothes. Right. How's Monday looking for you?
I took a shower too.
Even better. Thank you. We're very grateful. How's Monday looking for you?
It looks actually a busy Monday. There are a lot of events going on. People try to get it out of the way before the summer. So
excellent. That sense of that sense of end of term. Right. Tell us what's happening in the papers. I mean, I've mentioned in the headlines that US and Iran have agreed to halt these sort of backwards and forwards attacks in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of negotiating. They try to convince either each other or themselves that they still have the leverage to continue this war. So if you think I'm entering into negotiation from a position of weakness, you are wrong. You know, the Iranians are, we can still close the Strait of Hormuz, and we know how desperate you are to keep it open. And the Americans try to say, okay, if you keep doing this and there is no progress, we can still the military might, and the Israelis are in the background and they definitely want to continue that. It's not very positive because they don't build what is so important in negotiation, which an element of trust. And usually you don't have it under war, but also beyond the trust, an element of commitment that they want to end. So both sides want to end the war. They know that the other side want to end the war, but they want to end it on their terms.
So this now goes to the technical negotiations following the Memorandum of Understanding, which is always the hardest part.
Yeah, and at least it's out to know who is running the show right now in Tehran, because so many people been killed in the top echelon. But in the United States, there is not much expertise when you see who negotiates. And there is different expertise, whether it's navigation, the nuclear issue. There's so many issues, ballistic missiles, then the relations with the groups that are back, the proxies of Iran. And you need expertise and you need patience there, and you need a strategic outlook. And I doubt if it's right now exists.
Let's move on to a story in The Independent. Joe Biden has appeared in public and has actually done quite a powerful job, which is the one thing that, his power had diminished enormously before he left the presidency. He's now stood up and started shouting about Donald Trump.
Yeah, we all thought that Biden took retirement seriously and won't appear in public. We know he's not very well, but I think they just had enough with Trump and shooting in all directions towards whether it's Obama or Biden, and he went as far as calling Trump a loser and talking about all, it was a big gala, Democratic Party gala in Maryland, and he seemed to be on good form and calling Trump a loser and talking about all these vanity projects, but we all know the East Wing, the ballroom in the White House. Calling the Kennedy Center after himself and the rest of it. So I think they are trying to rally the troops now towards the midterm election.
And is Biden that kind of the person to do that, given the fact that he was, he had to be sidelined in the run up to the presidential election? And he's called everybody. He's told people to stand up and to sort of assert themselves. This is a big rallying cry for the Democrats who have a bit of an open goal when it comes to Trump, because there are various areas of, among those who like him, impossible to shift their opinion. But among those detractors, there's a real need to mobilize.
Yeah, you need to mobilize because there is some sense of despair after losing the presidential election. And we know that the midterm elections are so crucial to what's going to happen, not only the next 2 years, but in the next presidential election. And I think with Biden, I think that he took kind of quite a long time to be out of the limelight. He comes back. He was highly respected politician for so many years. He's an operator. He knows how to work the political party. But at the end of the day, to win the midterm election is not only to rally the party. This is one thing. Make sure that all the activists are, up and down the country are out there and campaigning, but also to show that there is a fighting spirit in the party to go and convince those who feel let down by Trump.
Let's move on to a really good article in the Financial Times today. It's 10 years since Brexit, and during that time, one of the leading politicians campaigning for the UK exiting the European Union famously said, "We've had enough of experts."
Yeah.
And when this comes to experts, does this mean sort of like management consultants and change consultants and consultants? And I have no idea what these people do. Anyway, this idea that actually we do need more experts and we're still in love with experts. And actually, contrary to the fact that the internet seems to have made everybody an expert, experts are actually having a moment again.
Yeah, and you can't really provide expertise in 240 signs, or as they try to do. But it's very interesting, and I think we can mention Lord Gove here, because as a politician now he reinvented himself as almost an intellectual, but as a politician he was also a hard hitter. So, we don't need expertise, and that's the way that Brexit, we're still reeling from Brexit. So I think we need to make a distinction. That's what attracted me to this article, is between consultants and expertise. You have consultants that think they can consult about everything because they have like MBA or some about advising, and they think that they can advise about selling fizzy drinks as much as an education or media or how to renovate hospitals, and because they know everything, because they're consultants and they have a degree in business administration. And everyone that's been in an organization, my case in academia, and you bring these external consultants and they try to apply exactly the same remedy to whatever problem there is in organization. And what this article shows, that for instance, if doctors reform a hospital, there is much better chance of this improving. If it's in the case, if you bring in, like in the case of CBS News, you bring someone like Ben Weiss that has no expertise, it causes trouble within the organization.
This is a bigger thing, isn't it? It's not just like bringing the consultants in when you have a problem in your company and you need to enact some sort of change. That's fine, and it talks about how consultants at the likes of McKinsey have been around for a century now. But the issue here is actually, regardless of the number of experts you have, the most important thing you can have is a good leader.
You need leadership, but leadership comes also with experience. There is the kind of course, the characteristics of leadership, but you need the knowledge that comes with it. You need the ability to, the courage to understand the need for change within organization and lead it. And you see, there is not always the case that people bother. It's also sometimes of age. How do you acquire all this expertise along the way that then you can share it and lead and also build a trust with people that are going to affected by this change. So this kind of bring back expertise, whatever field you're working.
It's an excellent article. It says basically outside generalist advice is not necessarily the best thing to do. What you need to do, I think one example, it said that in 62 years of Formula One races, the most successful F1 leaders had disproportionately started their career behind the wheel. Finally, have you got a sleep tracker on? Yes, I have one as well. I don't actually know how to work it. It's an absolute waste of time. But apparently we're not supposed to, but the the Washington Post is now saying that a sleep tracker can absolutely wreck your sleep.
So it's kind of counterintuitive. So I have a smartwatch, but I don't use it.
I have one too.
Yeah, but I don't use it to track my sleep because
I don't know how.
I know how to do it because there is on the app, but I find it distracting. I tried it once, and then you start looking, am I sleeping well? And then I didn't know it's a phenomenon.
And then you get stressed.
And then people get stressed, and I think people that probably have anxiety start thinking, because as the articles say, you wake up, you feel really fresh, you think I had a great night's sleep, and you look at your watch and say, no, you didn't sleep well, you have a problem. And then before you go to sleep, you're really worried about it, and you almost create this anxiety. And I think it goes beyond the sleep, and there is even a term for this now, insomnia, is that the relations between human and technology, who controls who. And this is an example that even in your sleep, you're controlled by technology.
I shall stop looking at the watch. Yossi Meckelberg, thank you so much for joining us in the studio. You're listening to The Globalist. Now here's a look at some of the other stories we're keeping an eye on today. The US and Iran have agreed to stop a series of clashes around the Strait of Hormuz. More talks on the Memorandum of Understanding are expected to continue. Australia and Vanuatu have signed a wide-ranging economic and security deal. Australia will offer economic support to the Pacific island nation. In return, no foreign military base will be allowed to be established there. Vanuatu is at the centre of strategic rivalry between China and US allies in the South Pacific. And the world's most powerful particle accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider, shuts down today for 4 years. Scientists hope to upgrade the machine so that it can accelerate and smash particles even more effectively. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. It's 8:31 in Rome, which is where we sort of head next. Now, trying to leave the European Union via Rome airport is not easy. Personal experience of 2 months ago was that the new digital checks, they weren't working, and the number of backup border control officers was insufficient to process the hundreds of angsty passengers. Among them was me. Well, this is more than just a one-off. The CEO of Rome, Fiumicino, has issued a warning that his border system isn't equipped to handle this summer's crowds. And to tell us more, I'm joined by Sally Gethin, aviation and travel analyst, contributor to BBC, ITV, Sky News, you name it, she's on it. Good morning, Sally.
Hello there.
So, just going through, my personal experience, there were about 300 other people also trying to get through border control, and it was that awful thing that you have a superb airport. I mean, Rome has been redone. It's great. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous airport, ranking very, very highly. But the minute you actually try to get through passport control, you face hours of queuing, and it's caused huge problems for not just Rome but everywhere else, hasn't it?
Yeah, so this is a problem that's being replicated across Europe at the moment, and there's a real fear and concern by airport bosses in particular, let alone airlines and passengers, that this is going to hit an almighty crescendo as schools break up for the traditional summer holiday period next month. And with good reason, because airports are really in the most unenviable position at all. They've had to install all this infrastructure and get more resources for it, more staff and so on. And they simply can't manage the processing times and the defects, actually, which are in that infrastructure and the technology, the fingerprint scanners, too many sweaty fingers in the scanners themselves are causing them to break down, for example. There's a myriad reasons why these systems are failing.
Just explain to us, just run us through this system first of all. I mean, when you now go through passport control and you're a non-EU citizen, you have a biometric test. You have to put your fingerprint in. It's so unhygienic. You have to look at it. You have to get your iris sorted and the whole thing. This is to do what? This is effectively to speed up getting through Schengen.
So this is all part of EES, the entry-exit system. It's been in gestation for many, many years, going back around 10 years now. And the ultimate goal, the ultimate aim is to protect the EU and Schengen countries, 29 in all, from threats coming by undesired persons. And to its credit, despite all the negative headlines, since it was formally introduced in October last year, they say that they've managed to identify and thwart 1,000 actual risky individuals from entering the EU. So they're not going to give up in a hurry. And although it's in a really bad state at the moment, the plan is to have this roll out however many years it takes. And everything will go biometric, just as you said. And it's, as I said, entry, exit. So that's twice when you go to a destination. Now, it's only if you come from a non-EU country. And I must also add that Ireland and Cyprus are exempt in this as well. But for the first time, when you you go into this system, you go through a rather rigorous set of biometrics checks. When you leave, it's supposed to be much less so, very quick scan as you leave. But the trouble is it's breaking down and forcing people to redo the initial test, the initial screening over and over.
And this is what happened to me several times. The scanner doesn't work, and so you end up having to go through the traditional line. And guess what? That doesn't sort of do the job that it's supposed to. And we've seen the likes of Marco Troncone, who's the CEO of Rome, allowing passengers to skip the system simply because it doesn't work. But the problem, the difficult logistical problems, though, is that if you have 100 people trying to get through passport control and it's not working, your plane is going to be delayed. And that's going to have a much wider knock-on effect across the aviation world.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another really big concern in the aviation sector. So that, like you said, that will have a knock-on effect on the network as a whole. So even though Heathrow is outside the EU, obviously, airlines missing their slots, for example, if they do, or passengers not making it to the connecting hub, has a knock-on effect also. There's also a lot of liability baked into this as well. So airlines, for example, are liable if they carry a passenger who will not pass the biometric checks on board their aircraft. I think it's between €3,000 and €5,000 they find per passenger that doesn't meet that. So you will notice that when you actually board your flight, you are going to have much greater scrutiny. If there's anything about your passport or anything that, some tiny detail that you might have failed, they may not board you at all. So there's the missed flights, there's the congestion in the terminals, and there's generally a gridlock situation at some airports. But I don't believe that airport chiefs are legally in a position to be able to say we're not going to, that we're going to suspend it. It has to be for the governments of those countries to do that. Unfortunately, airport bosses are in this between a rock and a hard place because they don't have that power as their governments would.
Is this just a simple question of getting better technology? Because we campaign very much here at Monocle for having face-to-face and and person-to-person contact, and that is something which is fallible, but it seems to be working better than a biometric machine that doesn't like your fingerprint.
I think the problem with this is that the EC didn't really get things organised, and there's no single one unilateral system across Europe. So each country or its airport operators have, its border force departments have adopted or contracted out for different systems, and some of them have left it so late they're scrambling to do that now. And of course there's always teething problems with technology. Look at the airport scanners issue, where you scan your bags in from a security point of view. There were lots of teething issues with that. So it's the technology, yes, potentially, some of it is not as robust and resilient as it could be, but I think the whole organisation of it was so piecemeal. And okay, the goal was very laudable. Let's have a secure, let's secure our borders, EU and Schengen. But that's a goal, that's a principle. But this is reality. This is infrastructure. This is technology. This is real people, suffering, elderly, people who are pregnant, anybody like that who is at risk in those kind of crowded situations.
Sarah Lee Gethin, we hope it gets itself fixed. Thank you so much for joining me in the studio. You're with Monocle Radio. It is 250 years since the United States declared independence, and since then the US has grown into the world's foremost superpower. But where did America get all its power in the first place, and how long will it last? Well, Monocle's series All This Week on The Globalist will be asking that question, and we begin today with the rise of America's cultural powerhouse, Hollywood. Here's the film critic Karen Krzanovich.
Now, when we say Hollywood, you say Hollywood to anybody, and you can think of red carpet or glamour or excitement or if you work in the industry, depression and tears. But Hollywood across the world represents an ideal. It represents excitement, love, romance, adventure, success, succeeding over adversity. That is really what Hollywood says to the globe. And this is a great marketing feat that was trumped up by the film industry. Now, the film industry started on the East Coast because that is where Thomas Edison started he was the first one, along with his assistant, to create a moving picture. Of course, there are technical problems and some patent issues with that too, but he was so strict with all of his patents that he basically forced everyone who was making movies in either New York or New Jersey to California. Now, that wasn't the only reason they went. They went because beautiful, diverse scenery, so you can shoot anything in California. Terrific weather and pretty cheap labor. So there's a real reason why this very small town just outside of Los Angeles became this center for the film industry as we know it. We're looking at the years between 1910 to maybe 1927. I'm pushing it a little. But the real film that made a big impact, in fact was the first film shown in the White House, was D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, which is a hugely problematic film. And it still is for historians and critics and film lovers, because while it is a huge technical achievement for the time, for the era, it is also blatantly and fundamentally racist. And I think as a foundation of the industry, it did untold social harm against people of color, Black Americans in particular. And it is a real problem. But technically, you do have to see it as, I don't want to say the first blockbuster, but it was hugely popular. And if you watch it, and I have watched it, it's exciting to watch. I mean, it's beautifully edited and it's beautifully shot. And it's an exciting story if you take out the bad parts. So this was a real punch through the ether, and people started to notice what the medium could do. Goodbye. Rather than pick out films, because there's just too many, I could point to some fantastic films that we all think about and all enjoy. Let's look at stars and also studios. So the golden age ran from 1920s to 1950s, thereabouts. We've got all of the major studios. We've got MGM, Paramount, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, RKO, and all of these controlled production of the films. They controlled distribution, so who got them. And also, they owned the theaters. So this was we make it, we put it out there, and we sell it. And it's this pipeline. In fact, it was considered a monopoly. Now, this also combined with the studios hiring stars on contract, and we've heard that many times. I was on contract, which doesn't happen so much anymore. But the control that the studio had over what stars could do outside the studio was huge. What they could look like, where they went, who they were seen with. And this is why you get spin-offs like paparazzi or photographers like Ouija getting shots of Robert Mitchum smoking a spliff or something like that, which the studios would automatically clamp down on and not allow.
Well, that certainly is heartwarming. The poor ex-convict comes to a new town looking for a fresh start, and one of the leading citizens steps right out and offers him financial help. That's enough to renew your faith in human nature. It sure is.
Now, back in this era, this is where we get the sense of ease, of glamour, of talent, of beauty. Because actually what Hollywood is selling us, is selling the world, is an ideal image that doesn't exist. It only exists in that moment on film. We have to remember that back then we didn't have streaming, we didn't have VHS, we didn't have recording, we didn't have DVDs. We didn't have a way to replicate and distribute films outside of the actual spools of film, which were actually not very robust, succumbed to weather, got lost a lot, and were really heavy and difficult to transport. So we had what they call a monoculture. Hollywood's monoculture was selling the world this sense of impossible ease and beauty and glamour and success that, of course, everybody, whether you're suffering or not, is going to really want to watch because it's wonderful escapism.
I haven't lost my temper in 40 years, but Pilgrim, you caused a lot of trouble this morning. Might have got somebody killed, and somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I won't.
There are so many genres. There's westerns and musicals and film noir, gangster, romantic, screwball comedies. I mean, there's lots and lots of different stories to tell. And like the theater, it appeals to a huge number of people in all sorts of different ways. So this technology took root in other countries. And when they saw what Hollywood was doing, they thought, oh, we can do that too. Now, they didn't have the investiture, they didn't have the studio system, but they did have wonderful storytellers, great script writers, wonderful cameramen and cinematographers, and camera women as well, directors. Probably in the 40s, we see a spread to Italian neorealism, the French New Wave, got the German New Wave, and that has recently spread into Korean cinema, which is hugely popular.
내가 원래 손을 넘는 사람을 제일 싫어하는데.
오늘 이거 애들 아빠한테 꼭 비밀로 해주세요. 저기 손 씻으셨어.
And also China, which has its own box office, its own domestic box office. I mean, it doesn't need the West. It's doing just fine. And we have Bollywood. It makes more pictures than Hollywood does per annum. And we've got Nollywood. And we've got all sorts of little pockets. And the quality may vary, but when the quality is very good, it can vie with the best of Hollywood films. As much as I love Akira Kurosawa, Japan's great master, and as much as I may love Ingmar Bergman, Sweden's great director, the Hollywood template is somehow fixed in our cultural minds, and it can't be shaken. And I think it's because I'm just rereading The Odyssey, and people are arguing, why is that still popular? Because Hollywood capitalizes on the great stories, shines them up, makes them beautiful, makes them just ineluctable, you can't tear your eyes away, and then distributes them better than anybody else.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world?
Chances are near zero.
Near zero.
What do you want from theory alone?
Zero would be nice.
I don't think Hollywood needs to be the center anymore, or I don't think Hollywood is the center anymore of innovative filmmaking. I think people come up with a story, and that's really where it starts, and then they find where they can make it. So actors and writers may go to Hollywood if they want to work in that industry in that way. But because of distribution and because of the awareness of what film can do, I think you can make a film anywhere. You can shoot it on your iPhone. It isn't essential to go to Hollywood, but once you hit it big, you're definitely going to want to go there because it is the Mecca, if I may call it that. It still is the great chalice that all filmmakers would like to attain.
And that was the film critic Karen Krasanovic there. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
IQ, EQ, and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies, bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS. Banking is our craft.
So a moment ago we were talking about film. Let's talk about television and culture as well. To do so, for a roundup, Ashanti Omkar is a film and TV and culture critic, contributor to the BBC, to Sky News and to Times Radio as well, and also to Monocle Radio. Good morning, Ashanti.
Good morning. Lovely to hear your voice.
Nice to have you too. Now, tell us about what's happening in the world of telly.
Well, at the moment, everybody's talking about House of the Dragon. This is a show that's been, that started a few years ago, and every 2 years or so we get a season. And these seasons are made to, cinematic quality that we get beamed into our homes on HBO Max. And HBO Max has recently hit the UK. So it had a big premiere for this season 3. And season 3 begins with the Battle of the Gullet, which is a massive, massive battle scene that will have you quite rapt. You have to really keep your wits about you whilst watching it. And this one is being dropped one week at a time. Just to give a little recap on this, House of the Dragon is the prequel to Game of Thrones, which was widely successful. And it's come from the book Fire and Blood. And this one has been such a hit. This is the water cooler moment of this season, I would say. People are talking about it all the time. And I don't want to give you any spoilers, but let's just say that the story persists. The story is one that if you like this kind of show with the dragons flying about, this is the one for you. Matt Smith plays Daemon Targaryen in this. He plays a very shady character. Emma Darcy plays Rhaenyra Targaryen, and then you have Olivia Cook as Alicent Hightower. And a fantastic cast that goes with it.
And there's also some fantastic wigs. The appeal of all this is what? I mean, for those who love it really do go bananas, don't they?
They really do. And I guess the appeal is that this is kind of the sci-fi fantasy genre is very big. And this one falls into fantasy. And people have loved the books. George R.R. Martin wrote these books and people love the books. But, back in the day, they didn't have the technology to give us this kind of stunning visual of what people were reading. And to reimagine those books into, a live action drama is what this is giving us. And people, like you mentioned, the people who love it really love it. There are fan clubs. There are, it's another level of the discussions that go on around these. And a lot of this is, shocking storylines on top of all the action.
Brilliant. Let's get somewhere a little bit more earthly and a bit more real, and that's The Bear. It's, 5 series in. It has come to an end. For those of us who'd like to be absolutely stressed out of our minds watching television, this is perfect, isn't it?
That's right. It is. This one has been classed as a comedy drama, but there's very little comedy in it, is what I would say. It's very much a drama. This is set in the world of restaurants. And I guess for anyone who has friends who work in restaurants in any form, or friends who are owners of restaurants, you get to understand the behind the scenes workings of these. And this show, like you mentioned, it's a bit like that film Uncut Gems. It does keep you, I've mentioned keep you on your toes already with House of the Dragon. This one also keeps you on your toes because you just don't know how unpredictable this business is. And that's exactly what it shows you. And this time at season 5, it is ending and they've decided that that's it for this show. And with season 4, the ending of season 4 was one, and I don't want to go into the details and give you spoilers in case anyone hasn't watched it, but the ending of season 4 already felt like the end of this series. But here we are with a season 5. They have kept it going to give us a little bit of closure as to what might happen to this restaurant we've all been following, saying we wish we were there.
And indeed, and very, very briefly, it's that idea that you can actually choose to walk away from a very successful series.
Yes, indeed. This one had something like over 20, Emmy wins, which just goes to show how big it is. But sometimes a story finishes. They say that a story has finished and they'll finish it. Unlike something like Ted Lasso, where they said, we will only give you a certain number of seasons. And then they realized that they needed to bring it back, and that will be coming back very, very shortly. So it's really interesting to see a show like this saying, we are going to end it.
Ashanti Omkar, thank you so much, as ever, for joining us on Monocle Radio. You're listening to The Globalist. Now, since the revolution in Egypt in 2011, international brands have been rather wary about making large-scale investments in the country. But business confidence is returning, and hospitality companies such as Nobu are beginning to view Egypt rather differently. Nobu's opening up a hotel and residences on the north coast of the country. Monocle's Tom Webb caught up with the founders, the actor and director Robert De Niro, and they were joined by the producer and businessman Meir Tepper, the CEO Trevor Horwell, and Ayman Amer from the Egyptian real estate developer Sodik.
We've always been trendsetters. We go first, and first movers we go, then everybody else follows, which makes the company really in a good shape, and we keep the promise with our clients. The North Coast for Egyptians is really a very nice destination for the summertime, but it's turning to be a full year. Now they're having this vision from the government side. They're making a lot of nodes, airports, transportation. Over the last 10 years, things have really changed, and you can see this yourself. And now, by having the right experience that we can deliver, it's not only about the real estate. Real estate is a component, but people, they are looking for entertainment, for hospitality, for everything else that complements with this. And this is why we're having Nobu to elevate such an experience with us. So definitely Ogami and with Nobu is going to do a huge change in the North Coast and a huge change in the customer base, which is even coming to Egypt.
And Robert, looking back at the decision to move from restaurants into hotels and branded residences, how do you view that decision now, looking back?
Well, I just thought very simply, when we were always being asked to go into hotels like the Hard Rock, where we met Trevor, he made me aware of something that I was saying, and he understood it. And I might have been thinking about this before, but I became very aware of it. And then, as I say, he sort of said, I understand what you're saying, the way I remember it. They were asking me, we were in San Diego asking us questions about the Hard Rock. I said, the Hard Rock was a hotel. We're Nobu. I really genuinely did not see what the connection was or why we were being asked questions about the hotel. We weren't promoting it. We were promoting the restaurant. So I just realized all these places are asking us to do these things. Why are we just doing them instead of saying, wait a minute, we want to be part of this. We're the ones that everybody wants. And if they want us, they've got to give us something for that, other than just say, stay in your place and be in a restaurant. Because some hotel people I knew said that. Our partner said, well, why do you want to do hotels? I'm saying to myself, well, why do you want to do hotels? So we went in and did it. We just said, let's try with every new prospective partner, especially in a strategic place, to try and do a hotel. And we'll do a Nobu, but we have to have a hotel with it, or a residence.
And the luxury traveller is changing, and the demands from these hotels and residences are changing. Are you finding that you're able to keep up with that demand?
Well, when we first went into hotels, we felt that we had to bring something that was different. And at the time, I think luxury today has become very commoditized to a certain degree. And, to find something that is special is very, very hard. And, I think a lot of the brands today have become, we call it transactional, where they're just offering rewards and points and everything to get the customer in there. And it's not really, providing a great experience. All they're doing is trying to sell loyalty points and so forth. So we're not like that. And also many hotel companies, they need food and beverage operators to come into their hotels to make it work. And they were losing money in food and beverage. So we said, look, we have a model that is different. We have loyal customers that are locals. And we turn the model upside down. We have an upside down business model because, we have a lot of customers that come to us in food and beverage, which is not like that in others hotels. And then we also just wrapped around the hotel. And then we wrapped around the residences, and it became one ecosystem which everybody wants to be part of. So I think, from our perspective, we look at luxury in a different way. And we like to bring in the locals first. We embed the destination with the locals first. This is what we're going to do in Cairo. And we call it glocalization as opposed to globalization, right? That's what we do. It works very well.
Fantastic. While we're in Cairo, Robert, I wanted to talk to you about what fascinates you, what excites you about the city at the moment.
Well, I haven't been there for a few years, but it's a great society, culture. I've always wanted to go to Egypt, and I did take a trip with my kids when they were younger for about 2 weeks. I was happy I did. I wish I could have stayed longer, but Egypt is Egypt, No two ways around it.
I would ask him, Bob, when is he going to shoot a movie in Egypt?
Yeah.
That could be nice.
Yeah. Well, you have to find the right story. You have to find the people who want to put the money up for it.
I think if you have the right story, you're going to find
just like a hotel.
You're going to find the money.
If you tie it into a story about Egypt, and it connects, and it's interwoven in the Egyptian story, and then the government and whoever the people who they know who would have the finances would say, let's back this movie because it's good for us. I did that with Hands of Stone. They were trying to do it in Puerto Rico, and I didn't. I said, why are we doing it in Puerto Rico? Let's do it in Panama. Contact the people there who have money, who might be interested in it. It's a famous son of Panama, Roberto Duran, and so that's what happened. They funded it, people from Panama. Same thing here, great story set in Egypt, shows an important aspect of Egypt, the culture, the this, whatever, it's a romance or this, intrigue, whatever. They have an interest in making it work right, so.
And we shall make sure that we're going to work on this. This is our new target.
So I'm going to hold you to that. Next project. That's my kind of script for you.
Lovely. Last question, then. I want to stay in Cairo, and I want to talk about the gap in the market, perhaps, that you're filling. What are you bringing to the luxury landscape, to the city, that's much needed, perhaps?
I think it's a next level of living. I keep saying luxury, but it's a next level of living that we can bring, and then if you're doing it as part of a hotel and all the facilities, whether it be wellness and everything, and it's all under the umbrella of Nobu, it's going to be very, very special. Yeah. And people want that, and you'll bring in a lot of international buyers, and it all then creates another community. It creates an international community, and I think Egypt has grown. When I was in Egypt, my first job with a company called Hyatt was in Egypt. I actually ran a hotel in Egypt, and that was nearly 40 years ago. And I spent over a year there, and I've got a lot of fond memories, and Noit Nago Fuad and Fifi Abdul, the belly dancers and everything. It was fantastic, and we want to bring some of that back, as it were, to make it exciting with Nobu. So there may be a few belly dancers in the hotel.
That was Robert De Niro and Mayor Tepper and Trevor Howell and Ayman Amer, all talking to Monocle's Tom Webb. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers, Hassan Anderson and Joanna Moser. Our researcher was Josefina Gomez and our studio manager was Mariella Bevan. After the headlines, there's more music on the way. The briefing's live at midday here in London. The Globalist is back at the same time tomorrow. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thanks for listening. Have a great week.